5'5", 11 stone. In All Black terms, he was tiny. They called him the little genius, the pocket rocket, the pint-sized sensation.
This is a brilliant try by Batty.
In fact, everyone considered him small. Everyone, that is, except Grant Batty. Hulking forwards never worried this man. He'd tackle anything. He'd kick and he'd chase. He hated being beaten. And from Greytown to Cardiff Arms Park, they cheered and sometimes they booed a sensation called Bats.
To you all gathered tonight, I say, before announcing it to you all, that if the All Blacks that have been away, or past or present or future, had 15 guys like this in their team, I think New Zealand would have some great rugby players again, great rugby team again. So without any further ado, I'd say to you all that the winner of this trophy for this year is Grant Batty.
I guess I would have always been smaller, although I never had a perception of that as being a disadvantage to me. I had this sort of philosophy, because I was smaller, the brain had less distance to send the information for the various extremities of the body to do things, and as a consequence, because the message got there quicker, I was able to do things more rapidly than others.
This is Queensland's Sunshine Coast, hot, dry Aussie country, which the former All Black now calls home. When Grant Batty first came here to the Sunshine Coast in 1988, he planned to stay well away from rugby. After all, this is rugby league country. He turned his attention to other sports. But then it was rugby that flowed through his veins. And when he got the opportunity to get back into it, he just couldn't resist it.
I love the game. You know, I have a passion for it, and I think it is a good sport, and it's a sport that brings out a lot of good qualities in people. And I believe in the team sport ethic. I believe, in helping helping your teammates and so forth. And I think they are good qualities that kids, particularly children, should learn.
Grant Batty's love affair with rugby began in the sleepy Wairarapa settlement of Greytown. Robust little Bats was always an outdoors boy, and of course that included rugby.
Because of my small stature, there wasn't a jersey small enough that could be brought, so my grandmother knitted a jersey for me.
But on his rugby debut, aged 5, Bats just stood in the middle of the field and sucked his thumb. It was at Greytown's Kuranui College that Bats' sporting prowess really showed. He picked up every athletic title from 100 metres to cross-country to school diving champion. But it was in rugby that he would make the biggest waves.
I guess really right from the time he was just a little ginger-headed fellow playing for the Greytown club, he showed quite a bit of ability, but certainly in his last year at school he was absolutely outstanding. I doubt there was a better rugby player in the country at his age.
That year, 1969, the college first 15, led by halfback Batty, was unbeaten. The maestro picked up 61 tries, averaging more than 3 a match. Even his coach couldn't stop him.
Well, there was an occasion when we played Masterton and I thought we would possibly win, and I'd leave him out of the team to give him a break, and just so that he knew that all players occasionally had to be given a rest or put on the sideline. And so when he finally managed to persuade someone that he should play, and me as well, I thought fullback would be the place. He'd be well out of it there. We should win the game easily. He managed to score 9 tries, the little bugger.
When the country boy moved to Wellington in 1970, he learned quickly what top-class rugby was all about. This was an entirely new ball game for the university club's new second 5/8.
It was certainly far more vigorous. In fact, my recollections are the first 5 times I played Batony, I was concussed 4 times. And I was very small then. I was small then. I think I weighed 9, 6 or 7 or something or other, 9 stone 6 or 7. And it really wasn't enough to be playing second 5/8. I had to change my attitude mentally towards the game. I'd always taken things in a reasonably relaxed manner, in as much as if there was any bother with fighting and that, it was not a concern to me. But Tony, I guess, in essence, taught me that if I wanted to survive at the higher level, I had to adopt a far more vigorous attitude towards defending myself, and I got some real beatings, Mark. On a couple of occasions while playing for university, there were all-out brawls, which resulted as the university players wanting simply to protect me.
Batty's reputation, earned as a schoolboy, was so big that after just 5 senior games, he was a shock inclusion in the 1970 All Black trials for South Africa.
He was a brilliant little player, but the emphasis was on little, and I thought because of his size that he'd never really make it. But having said that, I didn't know the nature of Grant Batty.
Bat's big moment was short-lived, however. 15 minutes into the second half, he left the field concussed.
I guess in retrospect it's probably best that I hadn't gone, because I was still then very small. I just didn't have the physical presence to have, I don't think, to have survived an arduous tour of South Africa.
Game continues.
Bats returned to club rugby and the Wellington rep side.
Batty this time tonight.
It was here he met Joe Karam, a close friend with whom Bats would share his success.
McLean takes it for Queensland, and he claims the mark.
When he came to Marist and Pats the following season, and he started to play on the wing, and that's really when a whole new aspect of maturity started coming into his whole football. He'd never played on the wing before, and he played on the left wing because there was a good right winger there. He couldn't kick with his left foot, he couldn't throw the ball into the lineouts, and he really sort of applied himself. For the first time in his life, he had to actually start practicing doing something, because up until this stage everything had just been natural ability and natural talent.
In 1972, the two mates opposed each other in the All Black trials.
I always had an uneasy feeling that one of us wouldn't make it. That it was too much of a fairy tale for the two of us to be selected.
We're a bit lucky because the suspense didn't last too long, with me being a fullback and him being a wing 3/4. So it was Trevor Morris first and my name was second, and I think Grant's came out third or fourth. And the shock of hearing your own name sort of bypasses you, and almost the excitement. You saw your mate and he's in the team, and we were almost more thrilled for each other initially, I think, than we were for ourselves.
So the tiny kid from the country had hit the big time, and he was about to hit it like a rocket.
When I was selected for the first test against Wales, that was a remarkable sensation. Joe and I were rooming together prior to that test. That was like a nervousness that I've never experienced, since or before. A feeling of absolute terror to some extent. The ultimate enemy as they were at that stage. We had a young team, basically very inexperienced. And that was frightening. The tension running out on the Cardiff Arms Park. Pants wetting. Mark. Remarkable.
And an all-black side that has 3 men new to test matches. Joe Karam, the fullback, Grant Batty on the left wing, number 11, and big Hamish MacDonald from Oxford in Canterbury at lock forward.
Grant Batty was playing in his first test on his first All Black tour. This tour to Great Britain and France would forever be marred by the sending home of Keith Murdoch. But for Grant Batty, it was the chance of a lifetime, and he was making the most of it.
Gerald Davis, the referee playing advantage. Batty did well to recover.
He was the first rugby player I'd ever seen that just could tear a game completely apart. He didn't care how big people were or how many of them there was. He just did what he felt like doing, and it happened, and it really made for an incredible sort of guy to participate with.
While South Africa in 1970 had belonged to 19-year-old Brian Williams, he was now being overshadowed by the brilliance of 21-year-old Grant Batty.
No, nobody catch this fellow. Grant Batty. Twinkle Toes Batty, they call him.
He was a guy who went looking for work. He was a busy fellow. He wanted to really get himself involved in everything. I, on the other hand, tended to be perhaps sit back a wee bit more and wait for the ball to come to me, and as a consequence of that, I didn't score the tries, and Bats did.
Ian Stevens switching and changing to Bruce Robertson. Robertson, who's big and strong and powerful and who will make a try for Grant Batty, and he has.
I've got to say, though, that when we first started playing together, there was probably, the relationship was probably a wee bit strained for the fact that I had made my name earlier than Grant, and Grant blazed onto the scene. And suddenly he was scoring the tries and getting the rave reviews. And I guess I reacted in a totally human way. I felt suspicious about the guy. But as time went by, and we played a lot of test matches together and got to know one another, then Bats and I became very good mates, and we still are today.
Bats was the new try-scoring sensation. On the tour, he would dot down 21 times, 3 times as many as Williams on the opposite wing.
He's got great speed. Grant Batty is in. Grant Batty.
But another side of Batty would reveal itself on that tour. A man this size is an easy target. At least some thought he was.
I've never ever thought through about being involved in a fight. You know, it's always, if it happened, it happened. If it was a spontaneous thing, I believe very much in the Three Musketeers motto, all for one and one for all. And certainly in All Black Rugby during that particular era, there were times when, when we did need to collectively protect each other. I make no apologies for it.
Just because he wasn't as big as the next bloke didn't mean Bats was taking any rough treatment.
Bob Burgess, Grant Batty. This is a competitor. Tackled after the ball. He was tackled after the ball.
But to New Zealand, Bats was just the little guy fighting back, and they loved it. This guy would tackle anything.
Finland, there's a chance here. Oh, what a tackle by Batty on Priest. He's a real pocket dynamo, this Grant Batty. He's only 5 feet 5.5, but my goodness, he clatters into tackles like a runaway bullet.
Batty returned to New Zealand a hero, and 1973 Rugby Player of the Year.
If we could bless some of the big men in our team with your, well, guts and determination, we'd have some great players.
Batty's dazzling form carried him through 1974. He was top try scorer on a tour of Australia, and at Eden Park he played one of the finest games of his career.
Playing in there at fly half. Grant Batty. Grant Batty on his own. This electric little man scores his second try.
Well, as a player, he was brilliant. Totally unpredictable, impulsive. I don't think he ever really knew what he was going to do, let alone anyone else. I certainly couldn't pick what he was going to do.
Going, Dugan, Robertson, Kane in, looking for the reverse from Batty. Oh, that was good up to the 10-yard mark, and through it halfway, Batty. Kicking away to Williams. Back is Ford, going, and Williams, get him. For North Auckland is there, and Batty. Mr. Hazard, Batty scores his third try.
Well, I always considered it part of the occupational requirement of a winger that he scores tries, and really you were just you were the result of the cumulative effect of the team, and really there was excessive kudos given to the fellow at the end of the chain when there's an enormous amount of hard work done, by everybody else further in.
Sit going.
From a relationship born out of competitiveness, Batty and Williams had become a lethal combination, as they showed in Europe later that year.
What an embracing tackle that was. He appeared like an electric spark. Sid going again, trying to feed Andy Leslie. The pick up there by Batty. That's hoisted across for Brian Williams. It could be a sensational try, and it is.
Once I saw him positioning himself behind the forward pack, I just had an inkling that that's exactly what he was going to do, and of course that's what happened.
He didn't give you the look or anything, it just happened?
No look, it was just that, I just anticipated it, and he knew I'd be out there somewhere.
In 1976, Bats was due to embark on his toughest tour yet, to South Africa. But in March that year, during a charity match against his old foe Petone, Bats' knee met the skull of an opposing player, It was the beginning of the end of a brilliant career.
Really, the South African condition should have suited my style of game down to the ground. You know, playing on top of the ground, things being nice and quick against bigger and, you know, perhaps reasonably ungainly opposition. It wasn't to be.
Like most All Blacks, Grant Batty longed to meet and beat South Africa's mighty Springboks on their home ground. But Bats needed an operation to repair his damaged knee ligaments. However, that would jeopardise his chances of making the tour. So he chose to leave the knee as it was and rely on heavy strapping and painkillers.
Bursting towards the try line.
As the All Blacks thrashed Boland 42-6, Bats turned on 2 tries in the last 5 minutes. But his knee wasn't right.
I was constantly in bother because of the knee. A lot of pain, you know. And in fact, it got to the stage because I was running in a very imbalanced way because of the knee. I kept on tearing back muscles, and I'd have to have injections, pain-killing injections before games and then at half-time. Just to get through the game. We had to end up having a brace made, you know, from an American design.
That brace held the knee together as Bats struggled to find his best form.
Eastern Transvaal territory, 15 metres gone. Second half, Batty has kicked the ball behind the advantage line, and look at it go! Try!
After retiring injured in the second test, Bats returned against Natal, and against the odds, he was in sparkling form.
Play again. Out to Robertson, running it into Batty's position. Batty! Grant Batty may not be 100%, but that was a 110% effort.
But by the 4th test, the All Blacks were feeling the pressure of being down in the series, and combined with his injury, it was getting a bit much for Batty.
And Bill Bush joining that one now. And it's all on.
Well, I had to run a reasonable distance to become involved, but that was a result of some severe frustrations to do with, you know, the gammy knee and poor refereeing, and I'd had a gutsful, so I just trundled over and I believe I had to jump in the air even to get near the guy who I was intending to hit. I never enjoyed the South African experience at all. I felt the South Africans weren't, they were a good side. They won, they beat us, but they weren't as good as I thought they would have been. They were big men, but not particularly hard.
In that same test, the last match of the tour, Bats retired hurt again. And early the next year, he finally underwent the long-awaited knee surgery. While rugby fans watched and wondered whether he would be fit enough to stand up to 1977's touring British Lions, Bats decided to give it a go, at least in the first test.
Oh, I really did go into that first test in a poor physical state, and then the day before the game I strained a hamstring at training because I wasn't running correctly still. Went to bed and woke up and couldn't move. The leg just refused to straighten out. It took about an hour of just sort of massaging and that just to get the damn thing to work. And then about, by late morning, good as gold again. It makes you wonder just how much influence the brain does have over, or the desire to play, or does have over the body at times.
Williams can run here. Brian Williams not sure who to take. Steve Fenwick. Trevor Evans, there's a line-up out to the right. Batty! Intercept!
That was a result not of any particular skill on my part. In fact, the hard work was done by Bruce Robertson on a tackle on a fellow. And as you're aware, the ball popped up and I was scuttling then about as quickly as Sid Going used to scuttle. And I think, as you're probably also aware, I had about a 15-metre start on Andy Irvine and about 10 metres on Price, the Welsh prop. And they both got to me just as I crossed the goal line. But I still maintain that if I'd had to run to Kaikoura, I would have got there. It was just a question of how far you had to run, but I was in bad shape.
That try would be Batty's last for New Zealand. His knee was slowing him down. He couldn't stand the strain anymore, and Grant Batty made a decision.
Well, I'm retiring from international rugby at this stage, and I should imagine provincial rugby will also be treated the same, and I would like to play club rugby again, though. But at this stage, I'm certainly retiring.
Bats had quit.
That was it. You know, I wasn't going to play again. And BG phoned from Auckland, and a couple of other people phoned and said, you know, we need you, which, you know, that gave me a great deal of pride. You know, I'd broken down, I couldn't run, yet they still thought that even in my current state that I was worthy of being an All Black, and that meant a lot to me.
Now, it was a bit of off-the-cuff genius that let everybody know that Grant Batty was just different. I wouldn't put it past him to make a comeback, you know. But if he doesn't, then thousands and thousands of British rugby supporters will join with all you New Zealanders in the regret you must be feeling at the early retirement of a player that I will always regard as one of the great wings of all time.
Grant Batty and his family had settled in Tauranga, where Batty became a city councillor and built up several businesses. But in the economic recession of the late 80s, his lumber business began to fail. As the big-name partner, Batty was tried in the public eye. And while this program doesn't seek to unravel the complex details of the affair, it is obvious that in this case, being a former All Black worked against the bankrupt Batty. The fallen hero was an easy target for the blame and the media, and Grant Batty is still counting the cost.
Certainly my mother and sister in particular found it very difficult with the press that I received as a result of the collapse of the businesses I was involved in. And they were, you know, the press in my opinion was very unfair, very unreasonable, was biased, unprofessional. And it's taken a long time for the scars of that to start healing, and certainly they're still there, and I'm very angry still with a lot of people. Got a lot of lies told.
Today, Grant Batty has a new life in Butterham on Queensland's Sunshine Coast. He works at his wife's lodge overlooking the golf course and is involved in the local rugby club. Nowadays, young Sam Batty is wearing the famous number 11 jersey and showing a bit of Dad's old magic. Sam wasn't born when his father retired from rugby, but he still gets to see his dad play in Golden Oldies matches. And while the speed may be failing, the determination is still there.
Grant Batty was one of the great characters of the game, but he retired when he was just 25 years of age. One's left wondering what he may have achieved if he'd played a few seasons more. He's had his ups and his downs since he gave the game away, but one thing has endured, and that is his love of rugby.
He's also pretty competitive still, particularly on the golf course.
Come on, Leishman, will you?
Don't take it out on me.
And 14 years on, Bat still doesn't like to lose.